Most people have absolutely no clue which version of retirement they're actually building toward, and I'm not talking about some vague "you should probably save more" advice. I'm talking about six very specific, very different financial realities that exist in America right now. And the gap between the bottom tier and the top tier is literally the difference between rationing medications at 75 versus chartering a yacht in Greece at 68 while your portfolio generates more money than you can spend. Same system, same opportunities, completely different outcomes. And here's what nobody wants to admit. Most people won't realize which tier they're headed for until it's way too late to change course. My name is James, and I spend way too much time thinking about why retirement advice is so deliberately vague that nobody actually knows if they're on track. If you've ever wondered what retirement actually costs in real numbers, if you're terrified you're behind but have no idea what behind even means, hit that subscribe button, because today we're breaking down the six actual tiers of retirement wealth in America, with exact dollar amounts, exact savings targets, and exact monthly income numbers. No generic advice, just the brutal math of what each tier actually looks like when you're living it. And before we start, this isn't about making you feel bad. This is about giving you an honest map so you can figure out where you're headed and course correct while you still can. Think of this as the financial GPS nobody handed you at 25 but you desperately needed. Let's start at the bottom because this is where about 28% of Americans are actually headed, according to the National Institute on Retirement Security. We're talking about people who reach 65 with essentially nothing saved, $0 to maybe $25,000 if they're lucky. Their only income is Social Security. And as of 2025, the average Social Security check is about $1,920 a month. But here's the thing, that's the average. If you had low earnings throughout your career or you claimed early at 62 because you couldn't keep working, you could be looking at $1,200 to $1,000 to $600 a month. That's it. That's your entire budget. Now let me put that in context. The average one-bedroom apartment in the United States costs about $1,600 a month, so your entire monthly income doesn't even cover rent in most cities. Before food, before utilities, before the $200 to $300 a month in Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket medical costs that Social Security doesn't cover. The math at Tier 1 is genuinely brutal. This is why you see 72-year-olds working at Home Depot, not because they love retail, because the alternative is homelessness. According to the Census Bureau, about 15% of Americans over 65 live below the poverty line. That's Tier 1. The one thing that makes Tier 1 survivable is owning a paid-off home. If you hit retirement with no mortgage, that $1,400 Social Security check suddenly covers utilities, food, and basic expenses, barely. But it's survivable. The problem is most Tier 1 retirees either never owned, lost their home during a financial crisis, or drained their equity through a reverse mortgage just to survive their 60s. If you're young and watching this, here's the fix. Start contributing to a 401k immediately. Even $150 a month starting at age 25 at 7% average returns grows to about $380,000 by 65 timed returns. That moves you from Tier 1 to Tier 3. The cost? About $35 a week. The price of takeout twice a month. Tier 2 is what I call survival retirement. You're not in crisis, but you're not comfortable either. You're just surviving month to month. We're talking about people who hit retirement with $25,000 to $150,000 saved. Combined with Social Security, total monthly income lands somewhere between $1,800 and $2,400. Let's say you have $100,000 saved. Using the 4% withdrawal rule, that's $333 a month from your portfolio. Add an average Social Security check of $1,920 and you're at $2,253 a month, about $27,000 a year. Here's what makes Tier 2 particularly dangerous. It feels okay until it's not. The margin for error is razor thin. One major medical event not covered by Medicare can wipe out $30,000 in one shot. Car breaks down, that's $4,000. Each back dies, another $6,000. Suddenly, the math that was barely working stops working entirely. The single most important thing for Tier 2 retirees is being debt-free. A Tier 2 person with no mortgage, no car payment, and no credit card debt can live a modest but dignified life on $2,400 a month. A Tier 2 person carrying a $1,000 mortgage and $300 in credit card minimums is in immediate trouble. Debt in retirement doesn't just make things tight, it turns tight into catastrophic. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, about 40% of Americans enter retirement with some form of debt. That's what keeps them stuck in Tier 2. Now we're getting somewhere decent. Tier 3 is stable retirement. The bills are covered without stress. You're not rich, but you're not scared. This is the minimum every single person watching this should be targeting. We're talking $300,000 to $600,000 in savings by retirement. Let's run the numbers. At $500,000, a 4% withdrawal rate gives you $1,677 a month from your portfolio. Add the average Social Security check of $1,920, and you're at $30,587 a month. That's about $43,000 a year. In most parts of America outside New York and San Francisco, that's genuinely comfortable. At Tier 3, you're not sweating the grocery bill. You can take a real vacation once a year, budget $4,000 for a nice trip, and it doesn't feel irresponsible. When the water heater dies, you replace it without panic. You can have dinner out on weekends without doing mental math. You sleep at night. After decades of financial stress, that's priceless. Here's the real question. How do you get to $500,000? If you start at 25 and invest $400 a month in a diversified index fund averaging 7% annually, you hit $1 million by 65. If your employer matches 3 to 6% of your 401k contributions, you might only need to contribute $200 to $250 yourself to effectively invest $400 a month. These are genuinely reachable numbers for middle-class Americans. Not easy, not automatic, but reachable. The people who land at Tier 3 are never the ones who made the most money. They're the people who for 30 to 40 years made consistent contributions, didn't cash out their 401k when they changed jobs, and let compound interest do the work. Boring wins. Boring always wins. Tier 4 is where retirement starts feeling genuinely good. We're talking $750,000 to $1.5 million in investable assets. At $1 million, a 4% withdrawal rate gives you $333 a month. Add Social Security and you're looking at $5,250 a month. That's $63,000 a year. At Tier 4, you're not just covering bills, you're living well. You can take 2 vacations a year, international trips. Budget $8,000 to $12,000 annually for travel and it barely registers. You're driving a $45,000 car and replacing it every 7 years because you want to, not because it died. You're helping your kids with down payments. You're making meaningful charitable donations. And here's the beautiful part. At a 4% withdrawal rate, a $1.2 million portfolio isn't declining. It's likely still growing. The S&P 500 has averaged about 10% annually over long periods. Even with 4% withdrawals and inflation, your portfolio historically has a high probability of being worth more in 20 years than today. You're getting richer in retirement. That sentence would sound insane to someone in Tier 1 or 2. How do you reach Tier 4? Usually through a combination of high savings rates, 15 to 20% of income consistently, real estate investments, or equity compensation if you work in tech. The people at Tier 4 are disproportionately small business owners, longtime real estate investors, and high-income professionals who exercise genuine financial discipline for decades. It requires more than just maxing a 401k. It requires intentionality. Tier 5 is where things get genuinely fun. We're talking $2 million to $4 million in investable assets. At $3 million, a 4% withdrawal rate generates $10,000 a month. Combined with maxed Social Security, which tops out at about $4,873 a month if you delay until 70, you're looking at total monthly income around $14,800. That's $177,600 a year. At Tier 5, you're flying business class on international trips twice a year. You're spending $15,000 to $25,000 annually on travel without thinking about it. You're driving luxury cars. You're giving $15,000 a year to kids or grandkids to help with college or home purchases. Your financial advisor is talking about tax-efficient withdrawal strategies, Roth conversions, and qualified charitable distributions because now the question isn't, do I have enough? It's how do I minimize what the IRS takes? And here's what separates Tier 5 from Tier 4. At Tier 5, your portfolio is definitely growing faster than your spending. A $3 million portfolio growing at 7% after inflation is gaining $210,000 a year. You're withdrawing $120,000. Your wealth is increasing by $90,000 annually while you're retired. You literally cannot spend it all unless you're deliberately wasteful. How do people reach Tier 5? Entrepreneurship. Selling a business is the most common path. Real estate portfolios built over 30 years, executive compensation with significant equity, or simply extraordinary discipline with a long runway. Someone investing $1,500 a month from age 25 to 65 at 7% ends up with about $3.9 million. That's not fantasy, that's compounding. Most people just never commit to it. And then there's Tier 6. This is the top floor. We're talking $5 million or more in investable assets, often significantly more. At $5 million, a 4% withdrawal generates $16,677.977. It's $33,333 a month. Combined with max Social Security, total monthly income could be $18,000 to $38,000 or more. That's $216,000 to $456,000 a year. These are people who genuinely cannot spend all their money without deliberately trying. And most aren't trying, they're thinking generationally. They're working with estate attorneys to set up trusts, maximize step-up cost basis for heirs, and figure out how to transfer wealth without destroying their kids' motivation to build their own lives, which is genuinely harder than it sounds. At Tier 6, the annual gift tax exclusion, currently $18,000 per person per year tax-free, becomes a regular tool. You're gifting $18,000 each to 3 kids and 5 grandkids. That's $144,000 a year in tax-free wealth transfer. You're funding 529 plans with $90,000 super-funded contributions. You're making 6-figure charitable donations and using donor-advised funds for tax efficiency. The conversations at Tier 6 aren't about survival. They're about legacy, impact, and meaning. How do people get here? Entrepreneurship. Selling a successful business, real estate empires, executive-level equity comp, or in rare cases, simply starting at $2,000 a month from age 25 to 65, which at 7% becomes $5.2 million. That's not a fantasy, that's math. Most people just never do it. Here's what I want you to remember. Tier 3 is the minimum worth aiming for. $300,000 to $600,000 by retirement. And for most working Americans who start early and stay consistent, it's absolutely reachable. It won't always be easy. Life will throw curveballs, but with the right habits started early enough, this isn't a dream, it's a plan. The difference between Tier 1 and Tier 3 often isn't income, it's behavior. Starting at 25 instead of 45, contributing to the 401k instead of financing stuff you'll forget in 3 years. Leaving the money alone when the market crashes and everyone's panicking. Doing the boring, consistent thing for 30 years straight. Drop your current tier in the comments. Where are you now? Which tier are you targeting? Because compound interest doesn't care about your excuses, it just does the math. If this woke you up, smash that like button and subscribe. Next week, we're breaking down why the 4% rule might leave you broke at 80. I'm James. See you in the next one.